This week, our guest is Death at SeaWorld author David Kirby and former SeaWorld trainer Jeffrey Ventre. Because this is Fork in the Road. Boom!
October 24th on CNN is a movie called Blackfish. I have an addictive personality. When I get involved in something, I go hardcore. Yeah. Whether it's a tattoo, whether it's, when I got into NASCAR 15 years ago, I decided I'm going to make a living in NASCAR, which I do. I have to have the fastest cars, fastest motorcycles, Ducati. And when I saw this movie, Blackfish, it blew me away so much that I felt that it was something that I had to get involved in, which I am, which I'm very proud that I'm involved in. We're going to show the trailer of the movie. Our next guest is going to be the author of a book that I'm reading that doesn't have any pictures in it.
Wait a minute, you're reading the book?
I'm reading a book.
Well, you really are into this.
I am picking a book. And first of all, this is a book. Those things you hold, those little flat e-readers.
Kindles.
That's not a book. Because especially if you're this, like you're at the airplane and chicks are looking at you like, oh, that's interesting, Death at SeaWorld. Otherwise, you're just showing a black plastic.
No, that's not bad either. Whatever. As long as you're reading, you're good in my book.
Okay.
That's not bad.
I need help with the big words. So we're going to talk to David Kirby, who's the author of Death at SeaWorld. We're also going to have Jeffrey Ventre, I think.
So it's going to be kind of a serious show.
It's going to be serious, and I think it's very good. David is the author of a book called Death at SeaWorld. I have picked this book up. What happened was I saw the movie Blackfish, which I find incredible. We're going to play the trailer in just a minute. But I wanted more information, so I bought this book, and it's incredible. And rather than me tell you about the book, David, tell us a little bit about the book, Death at SeaWorld.
Well, the book sort of follows two parallel tracks. One is Dr. Naomi Rose, who used to be with the Humane Society, and she was a killer whale scientist who went up to British Columbia and studied these animals in the wild for 5 years, and then went to take on SeaWorld and captivity while working at the Humane Society. And then the other track are these four former trainers, Jeff Ventre, Carol Ray, Sam Berg, and John Jett, who one by one left SeaWorld and come to grips with their own feelings of opposition and frankly guilt about what they had participated in terms of keeping these killer whales in captivity. And the two sort of come together with the tragic death of Don Brancho in 2010, the orca trainer from SeaWorld Orlando, and they kind of join forces to sort of help with the OSHA case and provide evidence and information to try to put an end to this practice.
Because for people that don't remember, I remember when this story came out. I believe it was in 2010, and it was all over the news about a SeaWorld trainer that was, as far as the way she was killed, without going into details, it was very brutal by an orca. And the thing is that when it was on the news, they were blaming it all on her ponytail. They were saying that she had a ponytail that was hanging, and then the next thing you know on the news, they're saying, oh, it wasn't a ponytail, and they constantly tried to make it this girl's fault, correct?
Yeah, that is more or less correct. At first, the Orange County Sheriff's Office in Florida announced that Dawn had fallen into the pool accidentally, which was patently false. And SeaWorld officials stood by and let that misconception be put out there in the media. And then eyewitnesses called CNN and other programs and said that's not true. She was pulled into the water. And then SeaWorld somehow came up with this theory that her long ponytail had drifted into the whale's mouth, silicone. And some former executives from SeaWorld went on TV the next day to suggest that it was Dawn's own fault for getting in such a vulnerable position with silicone. But it came out at trial when OSHA sued SeaWorld that what Dawn was doing was perfectly within the safety protocols laid down by the park.
I know a lot of people that might just be tuning in are not really sure what the whole thing is, and your book isn't really isn't part of Blackfish, but they both deal with the same topic. And David, if you mind hanging on just for 2 minutes, we're going to play the trailer for Blackfish, which is going to be on CNN October 24th. I recommend everybody watching this movie; it's incredible. And just hang out with us. We're going to watch the trailer real quick, okay, David?
Sure, I think everybody needs to watch this.
Yeah, this is a trailer for the movie Blackfish.
When you look into their eyes, you know somebody is
probably led to what I think is a psychosis.
All whales in captivity are all psychologically traumatized. It's not just telecom.
If you were in a bathtub for 25 years, don't you think you'd get a little psychotic?
Dawn would tell you that it was her mistake.
They blamed her.
It's just a bold-faced lie.
I was just instructed to get rid of the tape. The industry has a vested interest in spinning these. That sells a lot of Shamu dolls. It sells a lot of tickets at the gate.
There's no record of an orca doing any harm in the wild.
That's a pretty good promo.
It's an incredible movie.
Promo.
It is going to be on CNN October 24th. And I know, Grant, that this is straying from the usual fork in the road, but this is something that after seeing the movie and reading David's book, I'm really into it. I mean, I'm doing everything and I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. Joining us on Skype, and I believe you're in Washington right now, is Jeffrey Ventre? Am I pronouncing?
That's right, Ricky.
Jeffrey Ventre.
What's up,
That's
Jeffrey?
right.
How are you, Jeffrey? What's going on, man?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks.
Thank you very much for being on the show with us.
I appreciate being on. Thank you. I listened to David's segment, and it was awesome to hear that.
It's neat because I think what we're hitting people that might not have seen the movie Blackfish yet, that don't know about this story. I was completely floored by the story, and it's really good to take your perspective. We're going to play a video right now while we're talking to Jeffrey that is of him as a SeaWorld trainer. And when you're watching some of this stuff, is it on right now? When you're watching, turn the music down so we can also talk to Jeffrey, but keep the video on. When you're watching, this is Jeffrey working with one of the, what killer whale was this that you were working with in this video?
That's from May of 1995, and I always preface it with, this isn't meant to encourage training killer whales in captivity.
Because that's what's interesting, watching this video and being a kid going to SeaWorld, we'll watch this video and we'll go, man, look at that. That killer whale is really enjoying it. Look at the relationship it has with you. That's so great. But the truth is, as you learn about it and learn about these beautiful animals, this is not the place they should be at all. Correct?
That's correct, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, the relationship is based on us providing them their food, essentially. And it's interesting to note that when you're interacting with the whales during the show, when the show's over and maybe you might walk out to the front glass, they totally ignore you. So it's a completely food-based relationship, in my opinion.
Something that I saw on the internet that I found heartbreaking was there's a camera that would just stays on the killer whales after the show and overnight, and it just stayed on it, and it does it fast forward, and it shows these animals in such a small enclosure just going back and forth for like 9 hours. And it's not only those pools which are too small, they keep the killer whales in other areas as well, correct? Like the pods.
About 7 different pools at SeaWorld of Florida, so they try to separate them out into the most convenient ways of setting up that first show in the morning. Typically, Tilikum, as mentioned in Blackfish, is kept by himself and is only intermixed with the females when it's time to breed and when they're trying to reproduce more killer whales in captivity. So he leads a very lonely life. They separate the animals out to try to limit the amount of social strife. Katina at SeaWorld of Florida is still the matriarch. She's in charge, and she beats the snot out of Tilikum just about every time they're together, unless she's interested in breeding with him. So during the shows, the animals are often put into small holding pools or medical pools where they can barely turn around, and that is to set them up because you can only have 1 or 2 show animals in the performance pool when there's trainers in the water. Right now, trainers are no longer allowed in the water due to the OSHA hearing, and hopefully they won't be let back in because, as we've seen, it's dangerous and more people are putting themselves in jeopardy if they get in.
Jeffrey, you were a SeaWorld trainer. What is it that totally changed your mind?
Well, I did 2 tours of duty at Shamu Stadium. The second time I got back, I had learned a lot about the natural history of killer whales by talking with people like Astrid Van Ginniken, who's a researcher, Ken Balcom, and so forth. And when I got back, I started to notice their collapsed dorsal fins, their broken teeth. They were dying rather rapidly, and they just weren't healthy. They were dying of exotic mosquito bites, for example. Kanduke died when I was there, and no one could figure out why he died. They eventually determined that he got bit by a mosquito that transmitted St. Louis virus encephalitis. He died in 1 day. So They were dying at young ages, breaking their teeth. We were told to tell the public that when we were squirting out their teeth or irrigating the fish out of their teeth, that this was superior dental care. What we didn't tell them was that they were breaking their teeth on steel gates that separate them, doing something called jaw popping. If you've ever seen two dogs on like the opposite side of a fence kind of barking at each other, killer whales will do this in captivity to try to establish dominance. And they'll charge the gate sometimes, and they'll bite down on the steel bars. It knocks the enamel out of the tooth, and then the vets come in and drill the pulp out of the tooth like a root canal procedure, and then they use a betadine solution 3 times a day to flush out the fish that gets caught in the borehole that's created from drilling the pulp out. For whatever reason, they can't put cement into that bored-out hole, and it's very likely that one of the reasons they die young in captivity is due to bacteria being introduced into the bloodstream through the jaw and the open boreholes in their teeth.
These animals are so, I mean, just tell us some of the things about killer whales, because most of us that are watching right now don't really know anything about them. First of all, the term killer whales, there's never been one that's ever killed anybody in the wild, but 4 people have been killed while they've been in captivity. But the family structure, and tell us some of the stuff that people that don't know that much about orcas.
Well, in the wild, they can live, females can live essentially human lifespans, or the average age. The mean life expectancy for a female is over 50. The mean life expectancy for a male is over 30, but they can live much longer. J2, aka Granny, in the Pacific Northwest is 102 years old. She's still the matriarch of that pod. In captivity, if you just simply average the lifespan of all the whales that have lived in captivity and are still living, and give them credit for even the half dozen or so that have lived long for captivity, they die in less than 10 years. The mortality rate is 2.5 times that of wild killer whales. So they die very young in captivity, often from exotic causes, mosquito bites, bacteria through their boreholes in their teeth. They are living in shallow pools susceptible to ultraviolet radiation from the sun, which depletes their immune system. They're getting frozen thawed fish, which people don't talk about, that is nothing that they would eat in the wild. We're giving them basically smelt, which are like sardines, about 60% of their diet. They don't even eat that in the wild. So they're getting dead fish, they're getting fish that they normally wouldn't eat. They have no idea how this impacts their nutritional requirements. We do know that frozen thawed fish is relatively dehydrated, because when you fast freeze a fish and then thaw it, it loses its water content, so animals in captivity are dehydrated. This contributes to their early mortality, and we used to have to pump water into the fish to get them the water that they needed, because they get all of their hydration from eating dead fish.
Jeffrey, we got to wrap this segment up, but real quick,
okay.
And this is something I want to do. If people really want to experience an orca in the wild, which I suggest, tell us real quick about, because I want to go up to San Juan Islands before the season ends. Tell us about that.
Get on a plane, fly to Seattle, take the Victoria Clipper out of Seattle. It's a high-speed catamaran. Go to Friday Harbor in San Juan Island, and get either Spencer or Captain Jim Maya to take you out on a personal whale watching boat. It's probably $100 to get on this boat, and you go out there and you're just in the middle of the southern resident community. The best month to do it is July, mid-July, in terms of sightings per day. And but there's whales there pretty much all year round, but it's your highest confidence of seeing ones in July. And it's pretty remarkable seeing them swimming in straight lines with straight dorsal fins, hunting. There's transients and resident communities up there. They live in these giant nuclear families that stay together for life. It's amazing.
We got to wrap it up. Thank you very much. And we want to remind everybody to watch Blackfish, October 24th on CNN. The movie is incredible. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you for David. Thank you both guys for letting me do that. Just for, I know it wasn't typical Fork in the Road, but we're going to go back to typical Fork in the Road when we come back. But see Blackfish October 24th. Check out the book Death at SeaWorld. Tiny can come back in here so we can abuse him so I can feel better about everything. This is Fork in the Road.
Fork in the Road.